Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we both live and work, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to the traditional owners from the places you might be watching. I welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples joining this workshop today, and acknowledge the wealth of creative practices that have taken place since the beginning of the dreaming. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jess Eggy. I make zines. I volunteer at Sticky Institute.
Hello, my name is Samantha Riegl. I'm an artist and I'm also one of the coordinators at Sticky Institute.
I am an artist 5 days of the week, and I've made a lot of different zines in my time. I've been making zines for about 2 years, maybe, mid-2018 or so, but I've been attending zine fairs and been around a lot of zinesters for quite a while, and volunteering at Sticky. I know a lot of people in the scene, I guess, but yeah, I make zines. I used to make a lot of illustration zines, but I've been getting really into some like nitty-gritty research sort of zines.
So I started making zines about 9 years ago. A lot of the zines that I made were her zines, and they focused a lot on my romantic relationships and in particular my failed romantic relationships. It was also around that time that I started volunteering at Sticky Institute. And I've kept making zines since then, and a few years ago I became one of the coordinators at Sticky Institute. The zines that I make now probably have more of a focus on collaboration with other zinesters and sharing just small drawings and photos that I've taken that don't really seem to have a place anywhere else in the world.
If I was going to define a zine, I would say the main thing about zines is just that they have to be independent. There's really no other definition apart from that, but often they are black and white, or they're photocopied from collage, or a lot of them are illustration. There's comics, there's zines that are poetry and writing, collaboration zines, but the main thing is they don't have advertising. They're not paid for by someone, it's just someone's passion sort of shining through in the form of something printed.
Yes, and I think also really importantly is that there is sort of no gatekeeper to what can be in a zine. So if you think in terms of like a traditionally published book, that goes through a process, at a publishing house, and then it goes through an editing process, whereas with a zine, as soon as you've made something and you're happy to publish it and put it out into the world, it's ready to go.
There's absolutely no censorship there, and that's why so many of the zines on the table are just drawings of dogs. You can make anything that is the beautiful...
Absolutely anything.
Anything. Your voice is what shines through, and there's absolutely no censorship with zines, which is amazing, and why it's such an amazing community to be a part of. What's one of your favourite zines that's on the table right now?
This one here, which is called Soft Drink in New Zealand, and this is a sort of guide/review of all these soft drinks that you can buy in New Zealand.
I've got a lot of favourites on the table, but yeah, I definitely like zines that do interesting things with format. Crotch is one of my favourite zines, and this one has pictures of superheroes' crotches, and they're really pixelated pictures. Like, the commitment is just stunning, and then it opens up into a poster of Robin. Like,
yes,
that's all I really want from a zine. Like, my friend Tiff made this one, which is in a milk carton, and there's like a little zines inside.
You do see a lot of, I guess, black and white photocopied zines, and that's now running alongside. You find a lot of colour copied zines, as well as risograph, which has become quite popular in the past few years, which is sort of an older printing method that has since had a bit of a resurgence, so there's now quite a few risograph presses around that you can go to get your zines printed.
But yeah, so zines can come, like, they can be bound like a book, or they could come inside an envelope, they could come inside of an Eclipse Chewy Mints tin. There's so many different formats, so many different sizes.
It also gets a bit tricky as well when you try to define what a zine is. And really who's to say that they're not a zine? Yeah,
as long as they're independent, as long as a lot of passion and love has gone into them, I think that's a zine. If it's an internet zine, digital zines, you had a zine that was a cassette tape, there's so many different ways that people can express their passion. As long as it's something that someone can consume, that's a zine. And that's, I guess, why it's such an accessible medium, is that no matter what your skill level is or the things you have access to, even if you don't have access to a printer, you can still make a zine
Yes.
and publish it online.
They are made most of the time out of love, and so not for profit. So
Yeah.
when you're making a zine, I don't think, if you cover your costs for printing, that's really
That's
exciting.
great, but a lot of people don't.
But, a lot of people don't.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that publish free zines.
Yeah.
Just the idea of being able to share
Share
their
the
voice.
content.
Yeah, like that's
Yeah.
important enough to someone that they will pay effectively to
definitely.
distribute it.
Yeah.
And there's some really talented, amazing like illustrators and people that do make money from their art that also choose to make zines as a really great outlet where they get to be a bit more free and not think so much about how do I make money, how to whoop someone like this.
Yes.
It's just like, no, just do what you love. That will shine through.
Yes.
Someone out there will love that.
Definitely.
Like this great zine about ants. Like there's so many good, you can really just do whatever you want.
If you like something and you make a zine about it, I think you will most definitely find a community of people.
Yeah. But so we're talking very much about recent zines, like most of these zines have been made in the last few years, but zine history goes way back. Obviously, printing press, I guess, would be the first zine, people distributing pamphlets, but the word zine really came into the forefront in 1920s or so, with this idea of, fanzine and science fiction writing, of people seeing science fiction and wanting it to be more, whether that was to be more queer, to be more inclusive, just for them to have written it, for the people to have a voice that didn't have otherwise, whether that's female writers, queer writers, people of colour. So that is where the zine community started and still is. Like it is very much giving a voice to people that don't have a voice otherwise. And you see it's travelled across, like you see it go through rock and roll and punk and all these places, but that is still the ethos throughout is I want to make something I don't get published by the mainstream media, so I'm just going to do it myself, and then I can interview the punk band that I love.
Yes.
Like, it gives me a platform as well.
So, zine genres?
Yeah, so there's so many different kinds of zines, but I guess there are some different categories they fall into. Some that you're probably already familiar with, like comics, or graphic novel sort of style illustration stuff.
I think another really common genre of zines are the perzines. So that is short for personal zine. So I think elements of a perzine, normally they are quite diary-esque.
That's one of those things where that genre is like not duplicated elsewhere. Like that's something that's so specific to zines.
Because you really do have the choice to stay anonymous.
But some people will publish like short form comics. We also like photography zines are a pretty common one that we get in at Sticky, especially people who want to share perhaps like their film photography, the idea of these, you only have a few shots on a camera, and of course the zine, which is such an analog medium, is the perfect place to share
it
those.
Fits. It fits really well with that.
I guess one of the other big ones would be something like poetry and writing. It's the zine is a great way to share, I guess, like small thoughts and small words, like maybe that couldn't go into a full book as well. Like it's a way to share ideas in a really compact way. But that's not to say that zines have to be as part of any of these genres, but I think the most common thing really is that you see zines that are very specific, trying to tell a story or trying to share information, whether that's educational or just oddly specific.
Just independent stories.
Independent voices.
Independent, self-published.
So I've been making zines for only a few years, and some of the first zines that I actually made were in reaction to being overseas. So one of my first zines was called Look Up, and it was really just photography and words. And from there I really, I did another one very similarly called Melbourne I Love You, again very much collage, but trying to fall in love with Melbourne rather than obsessing over the Europe I'd left. I made this zine, Some of the Spookiest Things, which is probably the zine I'm like the most proud of and has done really well. And it's just some things I find really spooky, like remembering what it feels like when a razor scooter hits your exposed 12-year-old ankle. I made this zine Q&A with my best friend Lizzie, where we invited people to submit work, sort of the topics, I guess, were being queer and being asexual. And it was just like super nice experience to work with someone really closely on quite a large zine and also to get so many submissions. One of the zines I talk the most to strangers about is I'd never seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer, until I watched episode 7, season 5 10 times, which I really did. I did it for the zine. I knew that I was making a zine, so I sat down and watched the same episode 10 times. Yeah, so I do make a bunch of different zines, but I do typically put them all together digitally, using handmade elements, but always like finally putting them together in a digital way, usually using like InDesign or Photoshop, to paginate them and get them ready for print.
This is actually the first zine that I made, full of self-portraits of me displaying different emotions. And I decided to hand bind it because I did not realise how much work that would be, and how painful it would be as well. This is what happens when you're missing 2 pages.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's why I did the binding like this. So this is actually a very similar zine, which is called Pumpkin Feelings, which are pumpkin emotions. And this one's quite interesting as well, because I think it's probably the first zine that I made completely digitally. There are a lot of photos online that you have access to and that you can cut up and manipulate and do a digital collage with. So I have collaborated on some zines as well with my friend Karis McEwen. Karis also likes to write about love and failed relationships and all of that sort of teenage romance and things like that. So before we actually met, a lot of people were saying, you guys should hang out, you should be friends, you're really into the same thing. And then, yeah, so we became really good friends and we collaborated on this zine, which we launched on Valentine's Day. When we launched A Brief But Intense Infatuation, we also included a survey. So kind of like your Sims zine, where we asked people questions about their crushes. And once we got enough responses, that's another thing that we compiled it all into a zine together, for people to kind of look and see people's different responses. And then we also collaborated on We Are Infinite. So we had a lot of sort of discussions about the different young adult books that we were reading, the first ones that sort of spoke out to us. And you know, what we really loved about YA. I like making zines about things that I really like, whether it's sort of a bizarre Logan Paul trailer or rocks or Animal Crossing or pigeons. Yeah.
It's an amazing way to connect with people.
Yeah, definitely.
In a really direct and pointed way of,
yeah.
Do you like this? I also like this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah, definitely.
So I make most of my zines on the computer because I'm from a graphic design background, no real reason. I'm trying to get more into analog and I have been making a lot more analog zines recently, but my default is always going to be getting onto InDesign and Photoshop, and laying out all my pages and bringing all my assets together.
Yeah, on the other hand, I think I've started making zines, I started making zines in a more traditional way. So that was it, for me, it was very cut and paste with magazines, photos, printed out text, or even like using a typewriter. I think both methods definitely have pros and cons.
Absolutely.
And even sometimes just combining them is really good as well.
I love making stuff analog, but then doing those final touches in InDesign, making sure that my pages are all in order, that it's not going to waste all my money when I print it, because it is going to be correct.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have a margin and everything's going to line up.
Yeah.
But I get the fun and the enjoyment and the catharticness of making something by hand and cutting and pasting and collaging and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought today I'd talk a little bit about a zine that I made, I guess, the most recently, which was back in February. And it is called Sims, Shame, Same. Yeah, so this zine was sort of born out of my love of playing The Sims. I got really into The Sims again recently. It was a game I played a lot as a kid. It seemed like a really interesting way to look at behaviour, gender, sexuality, all these things. So I kind of used that as a lens. And so the first time I've ever done this, but I pretty much put out a survey into the world and got people to write their answers into me, because I've done collaborative zines before, which is a pretty common way to make a zine, is that you put out a call for submissions and say, send me all your illustrations, or like it's a fanzine about the L word. And then everyone can send stuff in. Whereas this was a little different because I was asking, I think, 3 or 6 sort of questions. People could write in some long form answers and just some multiple choice as well, and tell me what they thought about The Sims and what their experience was with The Sims as children, young adults. using InDesign, I created some pie charts and I laid out all my text in different ways. But what I really wanted was just to focus on the answers. So I just love making zines that are very much content driven. You have such amazing conversations with people at zine fairs and other places because they're genuinely touched by like the work you put in and the content inside. So because I go by Dr. Jess Eggy, some people sort of saw the zine and thought it was genuinely a body of research, which is amazing, and I love that. But that's the thing with the zine is that you can tread so many lines and do so many things with it. Like I put this very personal, explicit thing in the back, but it's also very much research based in the front. Yeah, so that's how I went about making zine, from like inspiration to execution. So you make zines in a much more analog way than me.
Yes. So generally that just involves cutting and pasting, and there's generally like lots of little bits of paper and photos and all that kind of messy stuff floating about. So just to explain my process, I am going to walk you through how I made this zine here, which is called Melbourne Girl. So I think this would fall really traditionally into the genre of a perzine. So this zine documents a road trip that me and some of the other volunteers from Sticky took up to Canberra to attend a zine fair. So when we got back from the trip, I sat down and I wrote about the whole experience. And so with this zine, I decided just to type up all of the text on a computer and then print it out so that it would fit within the margins of what I decided would be a square zine. So this is something that I actually struggled with quite a bit when I started making zines, was that my margins were non-existent. I did not believe that there were margins, and because of that, a lot of I think my earlier zines, they may be missing the end of words, or just maybe illegible. By this stage, I was quite aware that I needed the text, that is such a heavy focus of it, to actually fit in. This is what my zine master ended up looking like. So there's quite a few of them, and as you can see, they are quite chunky as well, just because of all the different bits of paper that I've glued together. When making a zine, you want the total amount of pages that you've made to be divisible by 4. And I think that's something that people learn the hard way a lot of the time. And you need it to be divisible by 4, because if you look at this, which is sort of the zine spread, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Once I've got a rough idea of how many pages I'm going to make or need, I just make this little scrap booklet and I staple it together. I number all the pages really large so I can see that and keep track of that. And then at this stage, I pull apart this little booklet that I've made, and when I look at the little sheets, I can actually see which page is supposed to go back to back with which page, which other page, which is, how the page numbers get sorted, because it isn't a matter of just having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. If you have a look at this one, you can see that page 53 is next to page 10. So by having this little booklet, it's just it makes it a lot easier to refer to, and saves you confusion, and hopefully saves you money when you go to the printer, so that there's no mistakes. So this is a big mixture of content that I have. So obviously I've got the printed out text. Some of the backgrounds that I have for the pages are actually just hand painted. Collected stickers, printed out some of the photos that I took on an Instax, and then I also have a lot of collage papers that I used as well, and then glued it all down, collected up the little bits of ephemera, which I then included as well. And that is pretty much how it all came together eventually. And then this one, because it was really chunky, I was still able to staple it just using one stapler, which is good. And then that's it. Fold it, and then it's all ready to go.
Great.
Yeah.
Today we'll be making an 8-page zine, one of the most simple zines to make. To start, get an A4 piece of paper, fold it in half,
and in half again. Unfold your piece of paper and fold in half the other way. Now when you unfold your A4 piece of paper, you will have 8 pages. To turn this flat piece of paper into a small booklet, fold in half widthways, take your scissors, cut halfway down the center crease, fold in half lengthways, and push in. This creates a booklet with 8 pages. To make a zine, you'll need a piece of paper. An easy size to start with is A4, but you can make a zine in any size that you like. Scissors, a glue stick, pens, pencils. Depending on your style, you may also want a ruler, washi tape, stickers, magazines, old books, collage material. Alternatively, you can just use your personal computer. You can make your zine digitally using something like Photoshop.
A really cool thing that you can do with these 8-page mini zines, if you've got more than one, is actually join them together using rubber bands to make a giant mini zine. So to do this, grab your first zine and open it up so that it's in the middle. So that means you'll have 2 pages on each side, and pop a rubber band around it. Close the zine and flip it over so that the back is facing up. Get your second zine and again open it so that the middle of the zine is facing up. Again, this means that there's 2 pages on each side. What you'll need to do now is slide the second zine from the cover first through the rubber band that has been linked to the first zine. Once you've done that, if you close both of the zines, you can see that they are joined using that rubber band, which means that your 8-page zine has now turned into a 16-page zine. To add the third zine onto this, we repeat the same process. So, if we ignore zine 1 and flip to the cover of zine 2, and then open up that zine to the middle. Here you'll see the rubber band that is attached to zine 1 and 2. So from the back, we will slide on another rubber band. So make sure this rubber band is in the middle of the zine, and you'll see now there's 2 rubber bands. So close the zine and grab zine number 3. Again, we'll open it up to the middle and then slide the front through the rubber band that is attached to zine 2. At this stage, you've got 3 mini 8-page zines attached together using rubber bands, which means that you now have a 24-page zine. You can keep going with this to make your chain as long as you want.
There's lots of different ways that you can fold zines. They don't have to be an 8-page folding zine. A really common one is obviously folding pieces of paper in half, A5, A6, A4, and making a zine that's half that size and using staples to bind along the spine. You can also do concertina zines at any size. They could be square, they could be cut out of A4. Here I'm just cutting an A4 in half to make 2 smaller zines. You could attach these together using tape. There's lots of different ways you can make these cute little concertina or accordion fold zines. A really simple way you can turn an A4 piece of paper into a zine is also just folding it in half and in half again. This is a really simple way to get your message out there with a front cover, back cover, and a spread which will open up into a poster or just more of your content.
Now that's out of the way, let's make some zines.
We're both going to make zines on the topic of birdhouses and use the format of an A4 page folded into a mini 8-page zine. So the materials that I'm going to be using to make this zine are some old magazines, some old books, stickers, washi tape, and that's it. The first thing that I do when I'm making an 8-page mini zine is fold my A4 sheet of paper into a booklet. I like to work this way because then I can tell where the pages are all supposed to go. I know where my back cover is, my front cover, and all of the inside pages. And once I finish one page, I can just flip to the next and get going again. I've decided to primarily make this zine using collage. I have an old magazine here that I found in an op shop, and really luckily it has lots of different birds in it, so that works out really well for the topic of this zine. So while I'm going through these zines, I'm looking for birds primarily, and also anything that might be, a really good texture to add in so that I can build some other shapes and, build the birds' houses. So I think the really good thing about collage is that you can create very nonsensical situations or images in them when you're cutting and pasting things. So you can find a lot of things that just very clearly don't belong together, and then you're able to put them together and create something new. I find that a glue stick tends to get really, really messy for me, and I'm not very good at keeping my workspace clean already. The glue tape I find is just a cleaner method, and it also stops the paper from warping. Even though my zine is primarily made up of images, I have included some text on each page, and something that you do need to be mindful of when putting text into your zine is the margins. So if your text is too close to the edge of your page, when you are copying your zine, there is a risk that the text will be cut off. So if you are including text in your zines, make sure that it is far enough away from the edge that it won't get cut off when you're copying, or that you are okay with some of your text going missing. When working in collage, I think it's also really good. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be very scrappy, which is nice. And also it's very, very good when you make a mistake, because you can just easily cover it up with something.
Today I'll be making a zine about birdhouses. For the zine, I just used textures and a fine liner, and I drew out 6 ideas that I had for different birdhouses. I had a front cover, a back cover, and 6 pages, one for each idea. I like to create my zines as a flat page first. I make sure that I flip 180 degrees midway through, which ensures that it still turns out as a booklet with pages the correct way up, and then I fold it up at the end. And you can see that's my final zine. 6 pages, and a front cover and a back cover, and by flipping it along that long edge, it still all lines up when I turn it into a booklet.
Once you've finished your zine, what you have there is referred to as your zine master. It's from this master that you'll be making copies of your zine so that you can distribute it to the world. Once you've copied and assembled your zine, you can stock it at a zine distro like Sticky Institute, which is located in Melbourne. If you've got a digital copy of your zine, you could upload it to Quarantine Zine Club, which is an online library for people to submit and read zines. We've created a PDF resource that you can download after watching this video. In this PDF, you'll find a template for the 8-page zine. You'll also find links to all of the zinesters who have made zines that we featured in this video. We've also included online resources for you to continue your zine journey.